Now what happens is over a period of time from its introduction to the growth decline, products also tend to get commoditized. For example, today if you take desktops from in the initial heydays, today it's more or less a commodity product. Same is happening with many other categories of products. So they are all kind of getting commoditized and more the differentiation between one brand and the other and one product and the other on the key product functional attributes or the key physical attributes may be very marginal. There could only be differences in terms of the signal or the expression related aspects. So prices too tend to get more or less similar. And this you can see in many categories across the board. For example, in certain types of food related businesses, in beverages, so on and so forth. Now, for a marketer, it's important to see what exactly he needs to do at each stage, because the strategies that he adopts at each stage of the product life cycle determines how successful he will be and the product will be. So, if you take the introductory stage, there could be an initial basic product pricing. Like in the case of cell phones, initially cell phone service was very high, 16 rupees plus per minute of talking. So that was pretty high. Now you might in some other cases decide to offer it at a very low price. For example, Kraft has recently introduced the Oreo biscuit into India after its takeover of Cadbury worldwide. Now it's come up with an introductory offer for the small pack of Oreo at just 5 rupees. So is Oreo a new product, or is it a new brand in an existing product category? Now all those are questions for you to debate and figure out where exactly you want to put it in. So there could be different options that people might use, either sometimes a very high price, sometimes a much lower price. And then you'll find that people build distribution selectively. Okay, and then because they want to try and see how to reach the early adopters, the innovators among the customers. Typically the price tends to be much higher, like we saw in the cell phone case for a fairly new product category, and it typically tends to be cost plus because you want to recover and minimize at least your losses, or at least make sure your cash flows are just about neutral. And the key thing is to build awareness aimed at the innovators and select intermediaries, and you would like to really want to improve the trial ratio. In the case of growth stage, your idea will be to try and see whether you can create new product variants and different kinds of, like for example in cell phone services, multiple different kinds of product plans, maybe link it up to the cell phone itself. So many ways by which you want to try and increase your penetration of the market, improve the distribution and availability, try and reach more people through mass communication. And finally, if you look at the maturity and the decline stages, there's a lot more diversification of brands and models because competition is much more intense. There's a lot more jostling and battling for shelf space, for instance, if it's distribution led, channel led strategies. You can also look at pricing in terms of what customers can bear and match it to what competitors are doing, and you'll try to stress more and more on brand differences and try to build a loyal base of customers. Now in the decline stage, you will try to remove those products which don't seem to make sense in your portfolio, phase out and remove the unprofitable products, try to lower your prices so that you can milk the product during the balance stage of its life cycle, and just focus on retaining your loyal customers. So really speaking, these are broad strategies. Now like I mentioned again and again, these are in the framework of a theoretical construct, but how it applies to real life, I would urge you constantly to look at real life examples and see what companies are actually doing. Take cell phones as a good take biscuits, take many other product categories, bread, standard daily usage product, or even now today there are branded eggs. So where is it all coming? I mean, how are people doing things differently? Chicken, you have Godrej, you have Venky's, you have others in the fray. See what people are doing and figure out what exactly is happening out there. Now, the product life cycle and the adoption, we have seen that customers have a certain way of taking to new products. So you also can map customer categories and the product life cycle. For instance, in the early introduction stage, you have customers who are more innovative. The innovators tend to be there. Whereas in the more mature, the maturity stage, it will be the later entrants, I mean the later, the people who follow the example of the innovators and the early adopters who come into the fray. So, innovative products obviously will be aimed at innovators. Now, time and again people will ask this question, okay, does everything follow an S cycle? No, it does not. So, there is no universal pattern. It is pretty unique to many product categories. There is some semblance of a pattern, but one needs to make sure it is applicable to one's category and actually get the data to support it. There are therefore many changes, many aberrations to the standard pattern what has been put in the textbook. So, while product life cycle is very important, it is very useful for us to understand where exactly we are. It is very vital for us to map this theoretical construct to practical life, map an overall pattern with the specifics for our product category, see what other competitors in the fray are doing, map out what we need to do at different stages, figure out also which customer categories are out there and how to tackle each one of them. Now, it is necessary to remember that while there is a classic pattern of the S shape, there are many variations and aberrations, and it does not operate in a vacuum, but in a very dynamic and very fast changing, ever throbbing context. It is important to understand that the PLC helps us in formulating different strategies for different stages of the product's life cycle and very different categories of customers. But it is very important for us to remember that we must look at it not as a general framework, but specifically with respect to our own individual sets of products.